This one comes from Anselm. Genesis 1:14, Jeremiah 10:2, and Luke 21:25 all talk about signs from the stars. Are the signs ever specified, and should we as Christians be looking for them? And let me just quickly read those verses so you get an idea here.
Sure. Sure.
Genesis 1:14, then God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And then Jeremiah 10, let's see here, Jeremiah 10:2. Thus says the Lord, do not learn the way of the nations, and do not be terrified by the signs of the heavens, although the nations are terrified by them, for the customs of the peoples are delusion. And then Luke 25.
Okay.
Luke 21:25. There will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among nations.
Okay. These three are very different from each other. All right. What's interesting is the way the question was put. There's a question about the nature of these things and what they mean, and should we be looking for them? Well, the fact that there's a question like this shows that it's not really clear what we're supposed to be looking for. And if it were clear what we were supposed to be looking for, if it were not clear, then it's not clear when the sign appears that we're going to recognize it. So built into the uncertainty that's expressed in the question about the nature of these things, it seems to me to be an acknowledgement that these are not in a very effective way for God to communicate, if that's what all of this is about. But I don't think that's what all this is about. The Genesis passage, signs, seasons, days, and years, the sun and the moon. Well, the seasons, days, and years are all kind of, they're astronomical features that help us order our lives by the nature of the thing itself, not by an interpretation of a special message. And so, what about signs? Well, my suspicion, I haven't done any deep dive on that word, but my suspicion is these are all related in the same category. Certainly the last three are. So the reason that God gives the sun and the moon is to separate, is for daytime and nighttime and seasons. I mean, we know the role that these play in these kinds of things, and I don't think this means that there's going to be a special kind of spiritual sign that comes out of looking at the moon or the sun. In fact, this was a problem. This was a problem for the early Egyptians because the sun was part of their pantheon. And what seems to be clear, what God is showing them in Genesis 1, is that these are not gods. These are things that have ordinary functions. They are not persons, they are things. They don't have names, they have functions. And they have ordinary functions to do ordinary things. They are signs, or they show signs and seasons and days and years, which seems to me fairly straightforward. The only ambiguous word is signs there, but I'm inclined to take it in the broader category of the other three words. So that passage isn't telling us to, somehow discern something in the heavenlies, except for discern, it's daytime, it's nighttime, it's fall, it's spring, it's a full moon, it's that kind of stuff. In Jeremiah 10:2, that is a warning not to pay attention to the things in the skies. It's a warning against astrology. So I don't know. I mean, if anything, this is talking about the dangers of trying to look into the heavens and find spiritual significance in them. That leaves Luke 21-25, which says there will be signs in the heavens. Okay, I don't have the rest of that passage. Maybe you can read it one more time for me, Amy.
Sure.
Luke 21.
Okay. There will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves.
Okay, that's good enough, because what Luke 21 is a parallel passage to Mark 24 and to Matthew 24 and to Mark 12 or 13, somewhere in there. This is the Olivet Discourse. This is the last public discourse Jesus gave, and it's the discourse where he describes the second coming of Christ. Now, what he means by all of these things is, hard to tell. But in that discourse, what he does say is that the question, and this is clear in the Matthew passage, the question is, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And then Jesus gives some signs, and then he says, then you will see the sign of the Son of Man in the power, coming with power in the clouds with great glory, or something to that effect. So this is talking about heavenly heavenly, Matthew, Mark. I'm looking for the passage itself while I'm talking out here. This is talking about heavenly occurrences that coincide with the end of the age. Okay, well, let me tell you, when those things start happening, you're not going to have to discern the signs. What Jesus is saying there in Matthew 24 is there's going to be a dramatic display in the heavens that signal this return of Christ. And let me just read from the words themselves, because I haven't actually read this passage for a long time. So it says in verse 29, but immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Now, by the way, this could be apocalyptic language that was recognized by them to mean something else than just what seems obvious to us right now. But in any event, the reference is to what's going on in the skies. And then, next verse, the sign. Remember, they ask, what shall be the sign of your coming? And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all of the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And then he sends forth his angels, etc. So in the second coming, there are going to be, what seems to be described here very directly and unequivocally, is there are going to be a dramatic display in the heavens that is part of Jesus visibly and powerfully and conclusively returning to the earth. So what that means is, in none of the cases, these three cases that were given, Genesis, Jeremiah, and Luke, also with the parallel passage in Matthew 24, in none of these cases are we enjoined at all to try to figure out what these signs mean. In the first one, it's a natural sign. It's innocuous. In the second one, we're told, don't mess with that stuff. It's bad. In the third sign, it's just going to happen in front of you when Jesus returns. So there's no action guide to these verses at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, if any, it's the Jeremiah verse that says don't mess with that stuff.
Yeah, it does look like in this Luke passage a very obvious disruption of the natural order. You do have the waves and the seas and the sun, and it's just everything will be disrupted in a way that will signal the coming of Christ.